Throughout the 1980s, Japan's economy was the envy of the world and praised by contemporary scholars as a miraculous development. The businesses of this nation are rising strongly, gradually dominating key industries and expanding investments in the real estate sector worldwide. But by 1989, the real estate bubble began to burst, shaking Japan's stock market, sending asset values plummeting, and pushing many major banks into bankruptcy. From then on, Japan fell into a decades-long recession, becoming a painful lesson for other developed nations around the world. However, that tragic history seems to be repeating itself in China with striking similarities, most notably the crisis in the real estate market, a sector that once accounted for up to 30% of the country's GDP. According to some experts, the current number of vacant apartments in China is enough to meet the housing demand for approximately 3 billion people, double the country's current population of 1.41 billion. Many might think that behind this story lie plotlines similar to the 2008 financial crisis or the 2015 stock market crash. S current situation is far more complicated due to President Xi Jinping. Real estate was once a cornerstone of China's economy. Under Mao Zedong's rule, China virtually had no private housing as all personal property was deemed illegal and contrary to socialist principles. This notion changed in the 1980s under Deng Xiaoping, when China opened its markets and introduced capitalist elements into its economy. This event also spurred the boom of the private housing market in 1998, as the wave of rural residents migrating to urban areas for living and working grew increasingly stronger. As a result, city governments unexpectedly reaped substantial revenue from land sales and boosted real estate development. Moreover, the Chinese are obsessed with the notion that one must own a home before getting married, making the demand for real estate more widespread than ever. Therefore, apartments in major cities like Shanghai suddenly have prices on par with high-end apartments in Sydney, London, or New York. Even though the average salary in these cities is significantly lower than in developed countries. According to statistics from China's 35 largest cities, the period from 2004 to 2013 shows actual housing prices have risen by an average of 17% per year, significantly higher than the 11% increase in per capita income during the same period. Thus, housing prices in China have nearly doubled relative to average income over the past decade, despite high vacancy rates and profit margins. Additionally, manufacturing companies also contribute significantly to inflating the real estate bubble. Real estate prices have surged nearly six-fold over the past 15 years, leading to the emergence of numerous companies, both large and small. They all invested money in buying houses to speculate, aiming for higher profits than their main business operations. Notably, following the 2007-2008 financial crisis, the real estate sector emerged as one of the key drivers of national economic growth. According to estimates, from 2003 to 2014, China spent its budget to build over 5.5 million apartments. And in 2014 alone, over 29 million people were employed in construction businesses nationwide. At certain times, this country's real estate market was even considered the largest in the world, and accounts for 20% to 25% of the country's economy. On July 16, 2020, the Wall Street Journal reported that this country's real estate market had reached $52 trillion, and shook the U.S. real estate market on the brink of the 2008 financial crisis. To date, China still leads the world in homeownership rates, and real estate in this area also accounts for up to 60% of the total asset value of each household. China's real estate market is mired in difficulties. After more than a decade of rampant construction and reckless borrowing, the end of China's real estate market has finally arrived. A series of developer bankruptcies has caused severe repercussions for the banking sector and the national economy. The real estate market is experiencing a deep downturn. The era when cranes were the most familiar sight etched against the skylines of megacities has passed. The period when people crowded into trading floors to buy apartment units. Now, rows of high-rise buildings stand desolate and abandoned, with not a soul in sight. One of the standout projects is Tuong Van, an international structure built in Shijiazhuang City, Hebei Province. This project was launched by the Ha-Back Real Estate Development Corporation in 2009. It consists of two parts, with the southern area being an upscale residential neighborhood. To the north lies an international standard amusement park, China's version of Disneyland, and this is also the Valley of Happiness in Shijiazhuang City. But in reality today, it is known as the largest abandoned building in Shijiazhuang. The construction was unexpectedly halted in September 2014. The real estate company behind this project is suspected of involvement in illegal land grabs. That's the reason. Unauthorized construction and illegal fundraising. According to the latest data from China's National Bureau of Statistics, by the end of August 2023, the total floor area of unsold houses across the province had reached 648 million square meters. Based on calculations with an average area of 90 square meters, the country has now completed 7.2 million houses. However, there are still no buyers, equivalent to 1/3 of households in Vietnam. This puts particular pressure on small cities with populations under a few million. After a prolonged construction boom, housing demand in these cities has significantly declined. The appeal has significantly diminished compared to major markets like Beijing or Shanghai. China's real estate market recorded a 26.8% drop in sales in 2022, and this trend shows no sign of stopping. According to analysts' estimates, its current real estate debt amounts to approximately $8.12 trillion, and accounting for nearly 45% of the country's GDP, of which about 2/3 is mortgage debt and 1/3 is investor debt. The real estate sector is declining partly because local governments rely too heavily on land revenue. And the revenue from land sales, along with real estate development taxes and fees. They even misuse financial tools to borrow capital for project investments. When the government began tightening regulations on the real estate sector to curb speculation and control market prices, this market immediately became quiet. According to a survey by Morgan Stanley, Chinese households remain skeptical about the outlook for the real estate market. As of October 2023, about 80% of households in the country said they were not ready to buy a home at the present time. The sales of homes by the top 100 real estate companies dropped 33% compared to the same period last year. The situation is worsening as the debt crisis seems to have no end in sight. Two of China's largest real estate conglomerates, Evergrande and Country Garden, are on the brink of bankruptcy due to their inability to repay bond debts in recent years. Before the real estate crisis erupted, Evergrande was once a symbol of success, growing in tandem with the nation's prosperity. Established in 1996 during a period of rapid urbanization in China, this corporation rapidly constructed a series of apartment complexes in over 20 major cities across the country. But by 2021, when Evergrande announced its default, the event sparked a new real estate crisis, shaking the economy of the billion-people nation, toppling some of its largest corporations, and leaving installment homebuyers in a dilemma. Just a few years ago in 2018, this corporation was considered the world's most valuable real estate company. This crisis has had a profound impact on China's economy across multiple fronts. One of the most noticeable points is the sharp decline in construction materials and labor. Recruitment activities have also cooled down, while consumers are forced to tighten their belts to cut spending. The local government also faces difficulties in maintaining operations due to declining revenue. Several provinces are forced to cut salaries and employee benefits. Meanwhile, Beijing is also grappling with a series of complex challenges, including deflation, a rising youth unemployment rate, and a sharp decline in exports, among others. Sales have dropped to an alarming level. Additional incentive measures should be implemented to boost demand, but they must ensure that speculative bubbles do not reoccur. If this situation does not improve and the real estate market continues to decline, the massive debt of developers risks triggering a severe financial crisis for this billion-person nation. This is a sign that, despite the government's recent rescue efforts, the world's second-largest economy is still facing many challenges. Golden Goose. While global financial markets are skeptical about the prospects of China's economic miracle, domestic households still do not have full confidence in the prospect of an economic recovery. Not only facing the real estate crisis, Chinese youth are currently facing a severe employment crisis due to the overall economic difficulties in the country. Before the pandemic, the majority of visitors to temples in Beijing were elderly people, who often came to pray for peace. Over the past 2 years, these temples have attracted thousands of unemployed young people seeking good fortune. Although China's economy continues to generate millions of new job opportunities, and the unemployment rate remains at 5.2%. However, many current job openings are not truly appealing to fresh graduates. Moreover, in recent years, the Beijing authorities have also tightened regulations in the technology, finance, and gaming sectors. The young have missed many precious opportunities. For example, Zhengzhou, a city hailed as the industrial hub of 4 provinces, and was once home to the world's largest iPhone manufacturing plant. Now, only job opportunity posters in the sales field remain visible. Here are the natural English translations for your options. However, most of these jobs require working up to 75 hours per week. The monthly income is only about $400. While some people choose to temporarily stop working, waiting for better job opportunities to come their way. Yet there are still many who are willing to do whatever it takes just to make ends meet. Based on 2022 statistics, China is expected to have nearly 2 million university graduates. However, the surveyed unemployment rate among youth aged 16 to 24 in mainland China shows it had risen continuously for 6 months and reached a record 21.3% in June 2023. Amid the current challenging situation, the National Statistics Office has temporarily suspended data releases. Forecasts about the youth unemployment rate have sparked much speculation. The figures for July 2023 were likely far more dismal. Many graduates are forced to lower their expectations and accept jobs with lower pay than desired. Some people choose a different path, which is taking the civil service exam. Recently, this has become the top choice for many graduates from leading universities, but couldn't find a satisfactory job. To earn this tough bowl of rice, most young people have had to travel across every corner of the country as a journey of growth. From Beijing to Shanghai, then to Guangdong, Zhejiang, and many other localities, to explore which region offers the most attractive salary and benefits package. According to statistics from the Chinese Civil Service Survey website, here are the 2 English translation options, choose one based on context. This figure has increased by 54,000 people compared to the previous year, reaching the highest level ever recorded in the country's history. Although the number of successful recruits has increased by several thousand compared to the 2022 figure of 31,242. But the competition remains extremely fierce. Su Huyan went to Phi Tum's workplace, with the youth unemployment rate in their hometown reaching an all-time high. Chinese youth today are showing a special interest in Africa, a place promising strong growth potential and attractive income opportunities. Currently in Africa, Chinese companies operating there can be divided into 3 main types. Includes high-tech enterprises and state-owned enterprises operating in the infrastructure sector. And private businesses also participate in the commerce sector. The salary of foreigners working in Africa is typically composed of 2 main components. This includes the base salary, equivalent to the pay for similar positions in China. But the more important thing is the foreign aid. The more dangerous the place, the higher the pay. Moreover, the working environment here offers even more outstanding benefits. A relaxing, stress-free vacation, especially welcoming to recent graduates. As a result, young Chinese professionals working in Africa can earn 2 to 3 times more than they would back home. Compared to similar positions back home, Africa also offers free accommodation, while entertainment services are very limited. Most of the money they earn is saved or sent back to China. Africa also offers opportunities to work at top-tier global corporations. Businesses here usually don't have very high entry requirements. Currently, there is still a lack of accurate published statistical data regarding the number of recent graduates from China moving to Africa for work. But this is a topic that's sparking heated debates on social media forums, and is increasingly attracting the interest of young people. However, those who choose this path will face no small number of difficulties, such as limitations in healthcare access and personal safety. Since they spend all day cooped up in the workers' dormitory, they often feel bored and dreary. Especially for those who cannot adapt to the local culture, everything will become even more difficult. The 2015 study also revealed that over 60% of attacks targeting Chinese employees working abroad occur in Africa. South Africa, Cameroon, Nigeria, and Ghana are the highest risk areas. In March 2023, 9 Chinese workers were killed when a gold mine in the Central African Republic was attacked. It serves as a deeper wake-up call for Chinese youth about the consequences of venturing into work in the dark underbelly. Today's youth are no longer keen on marriage. A survey conducted at universities in China shows even the childbearing support policies introduced by the state. Today's youth have a different perspective on marriage and family, leaving us with no choice but to accept this change. Completely different from the older generation's perspective, marriage today is simply a personal choice. To improve quality of life, both mentally and materially, this is no longer a mandatory requirement. In 2022, the number of people getting married for the first time in China dropped sharply to just 11.6 million. That means a decrease of nearly 700,000 people compared to 2021. In 2013, this number rose to 23.9 million people. Demographers warn that without effective marriage and childbirth support policies, birth rate is projected to drop to just 1/3 of India, and drop to just a quarter by the end of this century. Experts also noted that as long as the total labor force continues to decline, labor costs will continue to rise, causing difficulties for some foreign companies in China. The company will expand the relocation of production lines to other countries, primarily focusing on the Southeast Asia region and India. The causes of the crisis. After China reopened and reintegrated into the global economy in 1978, this country has become the most spectacular growth story in history. Here are the 2 natural English translation options. Choose one based on context. And help nearly 800 million people escape poverty. But now, instead of returning to its former glorious era, after the government abandoned the zero-COVID policy at the end of 2022, he found himself in a difficult, dead-end situation again. And while half the world is struggling with soaring inflation, China once again faced the opposite situation when the Consumer Price Index dropped sharply in 1983. What is the reason this country has fallen into such a state of rampant deceit? The impact of the conflict in Ukraine. On the surface, China is still avoiding the risk of widespread inflation. This phenomenon is occurring in many different countries worldwide. However, most of this country's essential imported goods, including food, raw materials, fertilizers, and non-ferrous metals, everything is affected by the war in Ukraine. Moreover, their export activities were also impacted by the sanctions. And the slowdown is occurring on a global scale, especially when the Eurozone is on the brink of recession. Since then, US-China relations have increasingly reached an impasse. When the two sides still maintain deep political disagreements, this conflict is also accelerating division and fragmentation in the technology sector and the technological production chain between the two parties. The United States has enacted laws to address the risk of technology supply chain disruptions from China, and implemented a series of measures to restrict the export of high-tech products to the Chinese market, particularly semiconductors, while the United States also draws more allies into the technology war with China to build a strong alliance for this tech supply chain. The conflict also significantly impacts trade and financial cooperation between the two sides. The Washington administration has imposed strong sanctions targeting Beijing's businesses. The passage pertains to the Russian Federation and the implementation of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. This reflects the trend of decoupling in US-China relations, which is no longer confined to the real economy but has expanded to many other areas. However, finance has gradually become the core of the economy, and began focusing on developing the core economy. Chinese businesses regard Ukraine as one of the strategic destinations for expanding operations into the EU market. By 2021, the two countries had signed construction contracts worth $3 billion in the transportation and energy sectors. Chinese businesses view Ukraine as a potential investment destination and a crucial bridge to help them penetrate the European market. Sentiment has declined across the board as the conflict situation in Ukraine shows no signs of ending. Under the current circumstances, many ongoing projects will not be able to meet their deadlines. Economic experts also assess that the Beijing government is wasting billions of dollars on the Belt and Road Initiative. Currently, nearly 60% of China's foreign loans are allocated to countries facing debt crises. Who knows when they'll be able to pay? The phenomenon of population aging. Currently, China's population is aging at a faster rate than any other major economy in the world. And it's truly very difficult to find a solution. An estimated 30% of their total population of over 1.4 billion are over 50 years old. According to forecasts, by 2050, this country will have approximately 500 million elderly people aged 65 and older. Not only does this situation deplete the workforce, but it also puts pressure on the country's social welfare system. The cause of the gender imbalance stems from the implementation of the one-child policy in 1979. This issue has sparked widespread debate both domestically and internationally. The migration process from rural to urban areas in China is also one of the main causes of this situation. City life often comes with lower birth rates due to the rising cost of living. Even when China officially stopped implementing the one-child policy in 2015, their birth rate in recent years has remained at a very low level. The declining population leads to a corresponding decrease in housing demand. The demographic challenge of this country is similar to what Japan faced in the early 1990s. Thus, economic growth slowed down due to the impact of the pandemic. State-owned enterprises operate inefficiently and are gradually falling behind the overall market development. Population aging and financial pressures are posing unprecedented challenges to China's future. In 2020, the Chinese government under the leadership of President Xi Jinping implemented measures to tighten regulation of the real estate market. Based on the principle that property is for living, not for speculation. By August 2020, in an effort to control the growth of the highly leveraged real estate sector, the 3-lane rule for priority vehicles has been officially enacted. This regulation requires real estate investors to maintain a debt ratio not exceeding 70% of their asset value. Maintain a debt-to-equity ratio of approximately 100%, while ensuring a minimum cash to short-term debt ratio of 100%. Banks also face many restrictions when lending to real estate companies. The result was the collapse of the real estate bubble as credit sources dried up. The developers have become overly reliant on external funding sources. Currently, most of these companies are facing numerous difficulties, leaving many people wondering, what will China's next move be? China's efforts in responding to the crisis. Unlike the restrictions imposed in 2020, China is now ramping up support for the real estate market. For example, providing financial support to real estate companies facing liquidity issues. Accordingly, some of their debts will be due for payment before the end of 2024. Extended for 1 more year. The government also pledged support for this activity and eased real estate purchase conditions, making it more convenient for people to invest in this sector. Abandonment of the slogan. Even major cities like Beijing and Shenzhen have pledged to enhance support for the real estate market. It can be implemented in the form of reduced mortgage interest rates and lower down payment requirements. Although the central bank has cut interest rates, the desired effect has not yet been achieved. But this signal shows that Mr. Xi's government is willing